Hi, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. And in today's episode of the Runway to Retirement podcast, we're looking at part two of the question we posed in episode 4, which is how much do we need for a really good retirement? So, in the first episode, that was episode 4, we looked at how much income we'll need. So, how much money do we need coming in on a regular basis for our spending, on life, on holidays, on all the other good bits. So, today we're going to consider, once we've worked that out, once we've worked out how much income we need, how much capital we need to fund that income without us worrying about running out of money, which is the key. So we're going to dive into that. Before I get started, just as always, general advice warning. Everything I talk about here is general advice. That means it's good information, but you've got to work out by your own research whether it's relevant to you before you make any decisions, or you should seek advice before you make any decisions and take any actions. Let's dive in. So the how much question fits into stage 1 of our real financial planning framework, 5 steps. We always need to know where we're going. So part of that, knowing where we're going, is working out how much we're going to need. And as I said, how much income do we need to pay for that nice life? And then how much capital do we need to support that income? So let's have a look at that. And I'll start again with what the experts say. And if you stumbled across this and you haven't watched and listened to episode 4 first, jump into that now and come back to this. So it will be more relevant after that. So in that last episode, I talked about how Money Smart, which is a government website, talked about, and this is on the income side, and I'll translate that, what they say about the capital as well. Money Smart talks about how someone might need 2/3 of their pre-retirement income. As for the Australian Super Fund Association, has some standards on what constitutes modest and comfortable retirements for singles and couples. For a couple, 50 grand for a modest retirement, and this is income or spendable income a year, and 70,000 for a couple comfortable retirement, and for a single 31,000 for a modest, and 50,000 for a comfortable. So yeah, they're the averages. We talked about how you're not average. I'll say that again and again, and you need to work that out for yourself. So on the Money Smart website, it also has some of the ASFA information about lump sums. So this is straight from the website. It's a cut and paste. And it basically says that ASFA estimates that a modest lifestyle, which covers the basics, is mostly met by the age pension. So, and let me just put in the age pension amounts here so you can see. So the latest age pensions at the time of recording, 29,000 a year for a single, and call it 30,000. There's a few extra bonuses, and for a couple, it's about 43. Call it nearly 45. So for those numbers, for a modest retirement, they've said single 31,000. So it's not quite enough the age pension, but it's pretty close. So that's why they say this is ASFA for people that are happy to have a modest retirement as defined by them. Having an extra 100,000 of lump sum will help them top up over that period of time. Now, once again, averages are really dangerous here, because is this a person with a house, without a house? Obviously, if someone's renting, they're going to need more than that. For most of our clients that we see, they're done well, they're homeowners, and they're in that space in what I would call the middle, the mass affluent, where they've got a house and they've been used to earning reasonably good money. So that would at least push them up into the comfortable zone as defined by ASFA. And ASFA estimates that the lump sum needed at retirement to support a comfortable lifestyle is $690 for a couple and $595 for a single person. And that assumes a partial age pension that would increase over time. Now, they're okay estimates. If someone wanted to keep it simple, to not get advice, to not work out their own numbers, those estimates are okay. But they're not that practical, because you are an individual. And just, they don't qualify that in terms of, are you in Sydney, you're in Hobart, are you in Wagga Wagga, are you in Bundaberg? Depending on where people live, that absolutely affects their cost of living. And there's a lot of other factors as well. And this is why it's so important to do retirement planning that's specific to yourself. And let's now talk about some of those factors. But I just would emphasize again, you're not average. You need to work out what you want and what you need. And that's what this stuff's all about. So let's walk through the bulk of what this podcast is going to be about, which is the key factors that determine how much capital you're going to need for good retirement. So the first one is how much income. Obviously, if your number of income is higher, you'll need more capital. Let me give you an example. If someone decides they want 100,000 a year for life, and the first point I made here is there's never any judgment when we're talking to clients. If someone's used to spending 200,000 a year and that's what they want to spend and they're capable, that's not a lot, that's not a little, it just is their amount. If someone's very happy spending 70,000 a year or 50,000 a year, that's their amount. So I tend not to talk about whether that's good or bad, just what your capability is. So if the capability is there, then there's no right or wrong amount. It's totally up to you to decide. No judgment on us on what it costs. And let's face it, some lives cost more than others. For someone that lives in the more expensive parts of Australia, like the eastern suburbs, in Sydney or the southeast of Melbourne, life just costs more. And people that like to travel cost more. Travel, you can spend as little or as much as you like, depending on whether you're backpack style or whether you're front of the plane style. Once again, no judgment. So factor number one of determining how much capital you need is just how much you want to spend. So someone that needs 100,000 a year to spend needs more than someone that needs 50,000. Whether that's twice or not will depend on all these other factors as well. Someone that needs 200,000 a year will need more than the person that needs 100,000 a year. So then the other, and these first two are by far the most important, but all the other factors are important as well. So what is the return you're going to get? And at this stage, I'm going to actually jump, see if my tech works. I'm going to flick the screen and bear with me. Here we go. So one of the tools we use in our day-to-day practice is this wonderful calculator called How Long Will Your Money Last? So as an example, we've got our first two factors, how much income. So in this case, I'm going to put in $5,000 monthly withdrawal. So we've got someone that wants 60,000 a year and they've got a lump sum of $1 million, and we've put in some potential returns. Now, as I said, do not bank on these returns. These returns depend so much on the type of investments you've got. I'm going to talk a bit about how the return affects it, but on these averages so far, we've got $1 million in nest egg, 5,000 a month, so that's 60,000 a year. And you can see here the green bars showing today's value. So that's 2024 as we speak. The value of that running down over 34 years. And the orange is the balance in future dollars. So that's assuming a return of inflation plus 5% or 7.5% in a 2.5% inflation world. So let's have a look at the effect return makes. Let's say that return dropped back to 3.5% because someone decided they were going to be conservative, or they were scared of investing, so they're going to put it into cash. And you'll see all of a sudden that drops how long their money is going to last, ignoring Centrelink, to 18 years instead of 34 or 35. So a massive difference depending on the returns. We push that up a little bit, and if they took a little bit of risk, if that was 4.5%, it extends it out another few years. But as I said, at that 7.5%, something which is possible, doesn't mean it's easy. 34 years. Be careful when comparing returns. You'll see returns advertised on television that are 30-year returns, and obviously, returns change with inflation. So it's a whole detailed topic. I'm using inflation plus 5. The returns I tend to use for people inflation plus 5 or 4, depending on the risk profile. For inflation plus 4, 6.5% here, that'd be 27 years. And if we said someone's retiring at 60, that would run it down. Now that ignores some of the other factors I'm going to talk about. So we come back to these factors, and so that's the first two, and we'll keep playing with this. So how much income? In that case, we did 60. Let me go back just to show the other bit of this. So if someone wanted to spend 90,000, if they said, "Oh, Rob, I want to run all my money down by the time I'm 80." So okay, let's make it 7,000 a month. So 84,000. Yeah, we're now running down over 16 years. Not enough. We play with the return, 7.5%. And if they wanted that to last, for 20 years, we're getting close. If we allow for Centrelink, we're probably close enough. And that's one of the factors we'll talk through in a minute. So first two factors, let's add third, your legacy intentions. All that means is, that's a fancy way of saying how much do you want to leave the kids? There's multiple schools on thought here. There is no right answer here too. It's exactly what you want to do for your children, grandchildren, or the legacy that you want to achieve. That may not be kids, it might be other relatives, it might be charities, or other things you want to make a difference to by leaving a legacy. So let's give an example of that. So we tend to categorize it in 3 bits. So if I come back to this chart again, in terms of legacy, if someone's starting $1 million, they say, we want to leave that legacy intact, then we'd pretty much say, okay, probably about 4,000 a month. And I'll see how I'm going there. Yeah, we'll preserve that capital over time. So if they want to leave their house and $1 million in today's value for their kids, then the amount that they could afford to spend out of that pot with a decent return is about 4,000 a month or 48,000 a year. Now, other people quite clearly are in the spend the kids' inheritance pot, so we can play with that. And if we assume it's a 60-year-old, they might live 30 years, and we bump that up to 6,000, so up to 72,000 a year. We've now got that running down over, say, 25 years. And you can find ways to eat the house as well. I'll talk about that shortly. And by that, I mean consume the house in your later years if you wanted to. So that legacy will tend to run in 3 ways. Preserve the capital for the kids. Some people even say they want to build the capital for the kids. There's not many want to do that. And if you think about it, by the time most people, life expectancy these days into the 80s. So that means most people, kids will have very much be in their own pre-retirement phase. For most people in this audience, which are in their 50s, early 60s, their parents are either elderly or gone, or starting to get elderly. Obviously, a 55-year-old is going to have at least a 75-year-old parent. So looking backwards ahead for yourself, you're going, well, by the time I'm 75, 80, hopefully my kids have made it. Now, some of them will, some of them won't. These are things that evolve in your planning as well. So we got 3 factors so far, the legacy intentions, but then there's the flip side of the legacy, and we're seeing this a lot. There's trillions of dollars in transition around the world from the baby boomers as they age and pass away and their parents down to the next generation. We're seeing this happening with people, obviously, as they pass away. When you think about Australia and the massive increase we've had in property prices over a long period of time, you got people who and I'll take an example, even in a basic suburb in Sydney, there are many people that are sitting in $2 million plus houses. They're not particularly wealthy from that point of view, but if they're passing away and they're leaving that between 2 kids, there's $1 million each coming to those kids. So this matters. You can't ignore it, and you can ignore it, by the way. And by the way, these expected inheritances, they might be very modest, where it might be just a bit of change, 50 to a couple $100,000. It might be very significant. We're seeing cases where people have parents in Sydney, they might be in a $3 to $5 million house, plus they've done well with their own super. So all of a sudden, we've got clients that would expect somewhere in the next 10 to 20 years to inherit 3 to 5 million. That has a massive impact on someone's retirement planning. And you can't unknow that. If you know it, you know it, and it's in the back of your mind. So it's much better off to sort of work it out without being morbid. You want to wish you want to wish your parents a long and healthy and happy life. But it's inevitable. No one makes it to 150. No one makes it to 120. So even what we'll tend to do for planning is we'll assume, in the case of someone who's 85 or someone, just say, let's assume it's going to be in 20 years, just to take that into account. Let me show you what I mean. So let's say we had someone that, we'll go back to this case here, and let's say this, well, Rob, we've been spending about 100,000. We want to have a good life. We don't want to, and this, an exact case we've had on lately, a couple that doesn't have any children. So they don't want to leave a big legacy to anyone. They're happy to leave in their world. They've got money going to charities and nieces and nephews. But they don't want to leave a legacy, but they do want to travel. They don't want to explore. They don't want to leave it till it's too late. So they actually want in their retirement about 120,000 a year for a nice life. So call that 10,000 a month. So if I put in the 10,000 a month, now if they're only on track for $1 million, and in this case, this couple's in their early 50s, And we've worked out that they're on track for $1 million by about age of 58. So that's about 6 years away. So we go, okay, in 58, you'll only have $1 million. In the absence of inheritances, if you drew 10,000 a month, you're going to run out of money in 10 years. 68, that's no good. But the reality is this one member of this couple has aging parents. They're in their late 80s, and she's actually likely to inherit minimum $2 million. It's probably going to be more than that, but we said, let's assume $2 million. Let's assume it's in 15 years' time. So late 80s plus 15. It'll possibly be sooner than that, but let's assume 15 years' time. And then we'll add 2 million. So 15 years, it's about 6 years into retirement. So if we go to year 6, and when I say 6 years into retirement, I mean they've got 8 years they're probably going to work, and 6 years in that retirement. So if we think they're only on track for $1 million, we normally say, oh, you're going to need to work longer, or you're going to need to spend less. But these are the trade-offs depending on this way. So if we put in just in today's dollars, and keep in mind, this is probably going to go up because this money will come from a property, but let's just put it in $2 million. And look what's happened here. So they will get to age 56, 58, or whatever it is with $1 million. They'll retire. They'll draw down on those retirement nest eggs at $10,000 a month. And that's going to see their retirement nest egg run down. But that won't be a concern, because in 15 years' time from now, that would mean her parents would be 105. Now, these guys also have a nice house. So if the parents did live to be 105, 110, we can tap into a reverse mortgage if the money was starting to run out. But assuming what is more probable, and that the parents are gone somewhere in their 90s, this money kicks in, it boosts their retirement nest egg, and all of a sudden 120,000 a year is absolutely doable. And we might even say you can do more than that, because you're going to leave a legacy if they're retiring. If this starts at age 58, 30 years in, they're 88, and there's still $1.5 million left. Now, there's lots of time for them to plan that, but you can see how those legacy intentions, both what people want to leave and what they might receive, have an impact as well. By the way, I just should point out return. Return is really important. Once again, if these people were super conservative and they said, oh no, we want to leave our money in the bank, we're scared of volatility, 3.5%, they're actually going to run out of money sooner, even with that legacy. And by the way, they wouldn't have got to $1 million in the first place. So we'll leave that at 7.5 as we play through these factors. So that's 4 factors. Factor number 5, house plans. So let's go and say, and the house plans are really about, what are your intention with your house? Is it to stay in that house forever? Might you, when you retire, upgrade your house to something that costs more? Might you downgrade your house to something that costs less? So these things impact as well. So if we go back to our little calculator, and let me go back to the baseline, let me take out the inheritance in this case, and let me go back to, say, a couple that wanted $7,000 a month in retirement, $84,000 to live a nice life. And let's say they're on track, and we do the numbers, and they're on track for 1.2 million. We say, okay, this is not too bad. You're going to retire at 60, 24 years, you're running out of money. But they say, oh, look, we actually, we will probably downgrade the house. And in this case, they're in a $2 million house, but they are thinking somewhere in their first few years of retirement, they may test living in an apartment for a little while. And if they like it, move to a beachfront apartment, and they've mapped them out. That might cost $1.5 million. So somewhere early in their retirement, let's call it year 2, they might have a windfall of, say, 400,000, which would be the difference between selling their house and buying their beachfront apartment. So all of a sudden, this is comfortable. We can see that, there's no risk of them running out of money. This page is showing 40 years worth of projections. So if they're heading towards 1.2 million retirement, then they pull 7,000. And we might actually say, depending on what their legacy intentions were, this is either a good plan, or if they said, no, we're happy to spend more than that, we're happy to spend some of that inheritance, then we could say, well, maybe $9,000 is the amount you could spend, maybe not, maybe it's $8,000. So you can see how these factors affect. So at $8,000, they got 30 years of retirement. From age 60, that's probably pretty good. And they've still got a $1.5 million apartment. So then let's have a look at factor number 6, which is Centrelink. So far I haven't considered Centrelink, but in all of those cases, what would happen is as people fall under the asset test and the income test, they'll start to qualify for Centrelink. So in this exact example, you can see here $1 million is about there. As you fall under $1 million, people would start to get about $1 of age pension. And under about 440,000, they're starting to get for a couple about 43,000. So what that means is they can pull less out of their super or portfolios, and that spreads the money out. In our experience, Centrelink will add 5 to 10 years to the nest egg because you can pull less out of your nest egg to get the pension. Now, some people never want to have to rely on the government for anything, so they will need more money when they get started. Some people are happily. Let me give you an example. Someone, let's say we had a couple who had 800,000 starting at retirement, and let's say that, well, let's use the after example. So let's use a couple that wanted let's say they had 590,000, which I think was the after amount, and they wanted 70,000 a year. So let's say that's 6,000 a month. So 6,000 months with decent returns. Let me get rid of the windfall here. So if they had 590 and they wanted to spend 72,000, you can see they're going to run out of money in 10 or 11 years. But let's assume they're 67, and at this point they'll be eligible for a part pension. And that part pension might be about, and this is really rough. Don't take this. There might be 30,000, and if all of a sudden they're gonna have that 30,000 coming in as a pension, you can see how that just extended out their money for 19 years. And the reality is that pension will slowly rise up to about 43,000. So by year 13, and once again, I'm doing this rough, financial advisors have very good software to work this out more precisely. Let's say 43,000, and let's add that down. So you can see all of a sudden it's pushed that out from no windfalls or no Centrelink and running out in 9 or 10 years to adding that 10 years that I say. So Centrelink can add 5 to 10 years there to some of those things. And then there's other income. We're seeing people who might have other income, and I haven't talked about investment property. Obviously, if they've got an investment property that's going to provide rent. You see some people with granny flats, or they're Airbnb a room out, or they're putting in a boarder. So that other income will lessen the amount you need out of the portfolios as well. The big factor that's embedded into all this is how long you might live. The blended life expectancy for a 6-year-old couple in Australia is into the 90s. So there's a 50% chance one of them lives into their 90s. That would be in that, often that slowing down stage or the decline stage. That tends to happen around then. But it's a big factor for someone that, you know, we do get people who say, oh, Rob, I'm not going to live longer than 80, so I'm happy to spend harder sooner. I'm not always sure that's a good thing to plan. I've seen people say that, but then live longer. Modern medicine's quite amazing. But yeah, it's your plan. You get to decide on all this stuff. And then ultimately, then you've got the backup. Well, we talked about legacy intentions, but the other big picture thing is care plans. So take that couple I talked about that didn't have any kids. Very important for them to make sure they've got enough money to be looked after. They don't have kids that will be able to help with that. So very important that that's taken into account as well. So there's a couple of big factors in all this. Like I said, the income and the return are the two biggest, but all these other factors come into it as well. And as I've said a few times, this is chicken and egg stuff. You work out how much income you need. You work out what you're on track for in your capital. You work out whether that's going to do it. And then you may have to consider these other things, whether you're happy to get some Centrelink, whether you consider a house plan, whether you take into account any expected inheritances, whether you reduce your goals around what you want to leave to your kids. They're all trade-offs that determine how much you can afford to spend and ultimately when you retire. Because what most of us want is to be able to make a confident decision that we can retire and we're never going to have to worry about running out of money. Lots of people, most people in Australia don't have that situation. The average retirement is thrust upon people because of age or slowdown or health of them, their spouse or their parents, where they have to stop work for all of that. So important to plan for this as early as possible and to make the most of it and to know where you're headed. So I'll wrap up in a minute, but yeah, I just wanted to add these stages so that we talked about yeah, the bucket list stage, the active stage, the slow and steady decline. We talked about this last. So this is important to, all of this has got to be factored in the capital calculation as well. So it can relatively easily be done. So before I wrap up, just want to say for those of you that want to learn more, here's some of the avenues for doing that. You'll find this and other videos on our socials. You can read or listen to our book. You can keep tuning in the podcast. We have a long course, not long course, but a fully extensive course on how to build your own retirement plan and make sure it all happens, doing all these types of things. There's also a couple of mini courses on our website as well. Or for those of you that go, wow, this looks complicated, I'd really like some help with that, we can help you find an advisor. So in wrapping up, step one, we're in here, which is the goals, which is this episode today has been about how much capital you'll need, and it would be secondary to working out how much income you'll need. Every now and then it does work backwards. We'll have someone come and say, Rob, I'm retiring, I've got $1 million. How much should I be spending? And and based on the numbers and what we work out on, all these things we talked about today, when they're going to downgrade the house, whether what sort of returns are realistic for them, we can then work backwards and say, tell me, we won't say this, but we'll jokingly say, well, tell me how long you want your money to last for, how long you're going to live for. Do you want to rely on Centrelink? And then we can calculate, okay, if you've got $1 million and you're happy for A, B, and C, then you can afford to spend 70,000 a year or 80,000 a year, or whatever that number is. So the key takeaways today, once again, work out what you need. This is your future. It's worth doing the work. Work out that baseline. This is for the income side. And then once we've worked out the income, then we work out the capital requirements. And we're going to repeat that over and over if we've got capability. So if we do round one and we go, I want 90,000 a year to live off, you work out what you're on track for, and you're not getting enough. Yeah, and you work out you need 1.5 million, but then you project forward and you're getting less than that. Then you need to take into account a lot of these other factors. Will you work longer? Will you allow or plan on will you allow for the fact that you might receive an inheritance if that's in your space? Will you plan to downgrade your house? There are all the factors there comes into it. So once again, thank you for listening. Don't keep it a secret. Feel free to share. Please like this podcast in whatever platform. Feel free to ask questions or suggest topics for upcoming podcasts. And as always, tune into our website and all the other resources we have around. Hope you've enjoyed it. Till we talk again, have a great day. Rob McGregor signing.